The grand ballroom of Ravencrest Manor had never felt so cold, despite the hundreds of glittering chandeliers casting their warm light across the marble floors. Marcus Ashworth stood at the edge of the crowd, his hands trembling slightly, as he watched his wife Elena move gracefully through the sea of nobles and dignitaries. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration of their 10th wedding anniversary, but the weight in his chest told him it would be anything but. Elena wore the sapphire dress he had bought for her in Paris 3 years ago, back when her smiles were genuine and her laughter filled their private chambers. Now, as she glided from guest to guest, Marcus could see the careful mask she wore. Her emerald eyes, once full of warmth when they looked at him, now held a distance that made his heart ache. "She looks beautiful tonight," came a silky voice from behind him. Marcus didn't need to turn around to know it was Victoria Blackthorne, Elena's closest friend and confidant, the woman who had somehow woven herself into every aspect of their lives over the past 2 years. Victoria stepped beside him, her dark hair swept into an elegant updo, her crimson gown a stark contrast to Elena's softer blue. "She always does," Marcus replied quietly, not taking his eyes off his wife. He noticed how Elena's shoulders tensed slightly whenever their eyes met across the room, how she would quickly look away and engage someone else in conversation. Victoria's laugh was like broken glass. "Oh, Marcus, you really have no idea, do you?" She sipped her champagne, her dark eyes glittering with something that made Marcus's stomach churn. "Tonight isn't about celebration. It's about liberation." Before Marcus could ask what she meant, the orchestra began to quiet, and Elena moved toward the center of the ballroom. The crowd naturally parted for her, as it always did. She had that effect on people. A natural grace and authority that commanded attention without demanding it. Marcus had fallen in love with that quality the first time he saw her at a charity gala 7 years ago. Elena raised her champagne glass, and the room fell silent. Marcus felt his heart begin to race as he studied her face. There was something different about her expression tonight, something final that made his blood run cold. "Thank you all for being here tonight," Elena began, her voice carrying clearly across the room. "Your presence means more to me than you could possibly know, especially considering what I'm about to share with you." Marcus started moving toward her instinctively, but found his path blocked by several guests who seemed to have positioned themselves deliberately. When he looked around for another route, he caught Victoria's smirk and realized this was orchestrated. "Marriage," Elena continued, "is supposed to be a partnership built on trust, respect, and mutual understanding. For 10 years, I believed I had found that partnership." Her eyes found Marcus across the room, and he saw tears threatening to spill over. "But sometimes, we discover that what we thought was love was actually just familiarity. And what we thought was partnership was actually control." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Marcus felt his world beginning to tilt off its axis. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not like this. "Which is why," Elena's voice grew stronger, more resolute, "I must announce that I am leaving Ravencrest Manor. I am leaving this life. And I am leaving my marriage to Marcus." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. The champagne glass in his hand slipped, shattering against the marble floor. But the sound was lost in the shocked gasps and whispers that erupted throughout the ballroom. His vision blurred, and for a moment, he couldn't breathe. Elena continued speaking, but Marcus couldn't process her words anymore. His legs felt weak, and he grasped the back of a nearby chair to steady himself. Through the haze of shock and pain, he heard fragments. "Need to find myself again. Grateful for the memories. Hope you'll understand. Hope you'll understand." When his vision cleared, he saw Victoria moving through the crowd toward Elena, her face a mask of concern that didn't quite hide the satisfaction in her eyes. She reached Elena's side and placed a protective hand on her shoulder, whispering something in her ear that made Elena nod. The guests were beginning to whisper among themselves, some shooting pitying looks at Marcus, others seeming more interested in the scandal than the human cost. Marcus had attended dozens of these gatherings over the years, had considered many of these people friends, but now he felt utterly alone among them. Elena was still speaking, thanking people for their understanding. When Marcus finally found his voice, "Elena," he called out. His voice cracking on her name, the room fell silent again, as all eyes turned to him. She looked at him then. Really looked at him. And for a moment he saw a flicker of the woman he had married. Pain flashed across her features, and her composure wavered slightly. "Marcus, please," he said, stepping forward. The crowd parted reluctantly, allowing him to move closer to her. "Can we talk? Privately?" Victoria's grip on Elena's shoulder tightened almost imperceptibly. "I think Elena has said everything she needs to say," Victoria interjected smoothly. "Perhaps it's best if you respect her decision." "I wasn't talking to you," Marcus said sharply, his grief giving way to anger for the first time. "Elena, please. 10 years deserves more than a public announcement." Elena's eyes filled with tears again, and she nodded slowly. "You're right. We should talk." She looked at Victoria, who was clearly displeased. "Give us a moment." Victoria's mask slipped for just an instant, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. "Are you sure that's wise, darling?" You know how persuasive Marcus can be. The way Victoria said his name, like it tasted bitter, made Marcus realize that whatever had happened to his marriage, Victoria had played a significant role in it. The woman he had welcomed into their home, had trusted with his wife's friendship, had been poisoning Elena against him. "I can speak for myself," Elena said firmly, surprising both Marcus and Victoria with the steel in her voice. "Everyone, please continue enjoying the evening. Marcus and I will be in the library." As they walked through the crowd toward the library, Marcus caught sight of their wedding portrait hanging on the wall near the ballroom entrance. In the painting, Elena was radiant in her white gown, and Marcus stood behind her with his hands on her shoulders, both of them smiling as if they held the whole world in their hands. The contrast between that image and the reality of this moment was almost too painful to bear. The library had always been their sanctuary. It was where they had their first real conversation as a married couple, where they had shared quiet evenings reading together, where Elena had told him about her childhood dreams and fears. Now, as they stood among the towering bookshelves that held their shared history, Marcus felt like he was watching his life crumble. "When?" he asked simply, his voice barely above a whisper. "When did I lose you?" Elena wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking fragile in a way that made Marcus want to comfort her, even though she was the one breaking his heart. "It wasn't one moment," she said softly. "It was 1,000 small ones. Every time you made a decision about our lives without consulting me. Every time you assumed you knew what was best for me. Every time you treated me like an extension of yourself, rather than my own person." Marcus felt like she was speaking a foreign language. "I was trying to protect you, to take care of you. I thought that's what husbands were supposed to do. But I never asked you to protect me from my own choices," Elena replied, tears flowing freely now. "I never asked you to take care of me like I was a child. I asked you to be my partner, my equal. But somehow along the way, you became my keeper instead." The words cut deep because Marcus recognized the truth in them, even though he had never seen it that way before. He thought of all the times he had made plans without asking her opinion. All the decisions he had justified as being for her own good. All the ways he had unconsciously diminished her autonomy in the name of love. "I can change," he said desperately. "Now that I understand, I can." "You shouldn't have to change who you are for me," Elena interrupted gently. "And I shouldn't have to change who I am for you. We've both been pretending to be people we're not, for so long that I don't even know who we really are anymore." Through the library's tall windows, Marcus could see the lights of the ballroom, could hear the distant sound of conversation and laughter. Life was continuing out there, but in here, his world was ending. "Is there someone else?" he asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Elena hesitated, and that hesitation told him everything he needed to know. "There's someone who sees me for who I really am," she said finally. "Someone who doesn't try to change me or protect me from myself." Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the last thread of hope snap. When he opened them again, Elena was watching him with an expression of profound sadness. "I'm sorry, Marcus. I'm so sorry it has to end this way. But I can't pretend anymore. I can't keep trying to be the person you fell in love with when I don't even know who she was. As they stood there in the silence of the library, surrounded by books that had witnessed their happiness and now their heartbreak, Marcus realized that no amount of pleading or promising would change Elena's mind. She had already left him emotionally long ago. Tonight was just her body catching up with her heart. The sound of Victoria's laughter drifted in from the ballroom, sharp and triumphant. And Marcus finally understood that he had been fighting a battle he didn't even know was taking place. And he had lost everything. The morning after the anniversary, ball dawned gray and cold, matching the emptiness that had settled in Marcus's chest. He had spent the night in his study, unable to face their bedroom where Elena's absence would be a constant reminder of what he had lost. Empty bottles of whiskey lined his desk, evidence of his failed attempt to numb the pain that felt like a physical wound. Elena had left the manor in the early hours of the morning, taking only a small suitcase and the jewelry her grandmother had given her. She hadn't said goodbye. Marcus had watched from his study window as Victoria's sleek black car pulled away from the circular drive, taking Elena away from the only home they had ever shared. The servants moved through the manor like ghosts, speaking in hushed tones and avoiding eye contact with their master. Mrs. Patterson, their longtime housekeeper, had tried to bring him breakfast, but Marcus couldn't stomach the thought of food. Everything felt wrong, as if the very foundations of his reality had shifted overnight. The first call came at 9 in the morning. Marcus let it ring. Then came another, and another. Word of Elena's dramatic announcement had spread quickly through their social circle, and everyone wanted to offer their condolences, or, more likely, satisfy their curiosity about the details. Marcus turned off his phone and unplugged the landline. By noon, however, he couldn't ignore the persistent knocking at his front door. Through the window, he saw his brother Thomas standing on the steps, his face etched with concern and determination. Thomas had always been the steady one, the one who cleaned up messes and offered practical solutions. Marcus almost didn't answer, but he knew Thomas would keep knocking until he did. "You look terrible," Thomas said without preamble, as Marcus opened the door. His younger brother pushed past him into the foyer, taking in Marcus's wrinkled clothes and bloodshot eyes. "When did you last sleep? Or eat? For that matter, I'm fine," Marcus lied, closing the door and leaning against it heavily. The simple act of standing upright felt exhausting. "No, you're not. And that's okay." Thomas's voice was gentle but firm. "But you can't fall apart completely." "Not yet." They made their way to the sitting room, where Marcus collapsed into his leather armchair. Thomas remained standing, pacing in front of the fireplace like he always did when he was working through a problem. "I've been making some calls," Thomas said carefully, "trying to understand what happened, how things got to this point without any of us seeing it coming." Marcus looked up sharply. "What do you mean, Victoria Blackthorne?" Thomas's expression darkened. "Did you know she's been in significant financial trouble for the past year? Her late husband's debts were much larger than anyone realized. She's been selling off assets, but it hasn't been enough." The implication hit Marcus like a sledgehammer. "You think she orchestrated this? That she's been manipulating Elena?" "I think Victoria saw an opportunity and took it. Elena is vulnerable right now. Has been for months, according to several people I spoke with. She's been questioning her place in your marriage, feeling suffocated by the expectations of your social circle. Victoria positioned herself as the understanding friend, the one who really listened." Marcus remembered the countless evenings Victoria had spent at the manor, the long conversations she and Elena would have in the garden, the way Victoria always seemed to be there whenever Elena was upset or confused. He had been grateful for their friendship, thinking Elena needed a confidant. He had been such a fool. "But even if that's true," Marcus said hoarsely, "Elena still chose to leave. She still fell out of love with me." Thomas stopped pacing and fixed his brother with a steady look. "Did she? Or did she fall out of love with the version of herself she thought she had to be when she was with you?" Before Marcus could respond, Mrs. Patterson appeared in the doorway, wringing her hands nervously. "I'm sorry to interrupt, sir, but there's a gentleman here to see you. He says it's urgent." The gentleman turned out to be James Morrison, Elena's childhood friend and now a successful journalist. Marcus had never particularly liked James, finding him too intense and opinionated, but Elena had maintained their friendship despite Marcus's subtle disapproval. Another mistake. Marcus realized now. I know this is a difficult time, James said as he entered the sitting room. But I needed to speak with you before you heard this from someone else. Thomas and Marcus exchanged glances. Heard what? Thomas asked. James pulled out his tablet and showed them a web page. This went live an hour ago. The headline read, Society Wife Leaves Controlling Husband in Dramatic Public Scene. Below, it was a detailed account of the previous night's events, complete with quotes from unnamed guests and speculation about the reasons behind Elena's decision. The article painted Marcus as an overbearing, possessive husband who had stifled his wife's independence and spirit. Elena didn't write this, James said quickly, seeing the devastation on Marcus's face. But she didn't stop it either. Victoria gave this interview this morning, claiming to speak on Elena's behalf. Marcus read through the article with growing horror. Victoria had twisted every aspect of his marriage, making his protective instincts sound like control, his financial generosity sound like manipulation, his love sound like possession. Worst of all, the quotes attributed to Elena made her sound like a victim who had finally found the courage to escape her oppressor. This is all lies, Marcus said. But even as he spoke, he wondered if there wasn't some truth buried in the distortions. Had he been controlling without realizing it? Had his attempts to cherish and protect Elena actually been prison bars? Some of it is lies, James agreed. But some of it. Marcus, you need to take a hard look at yourself. Elena loved you, but she also felt like she was disappearing inside your marriage. Victoria didn't create that feeling. She just exploited it. Thomas was studying the article intently. This is character assassination. Why would Victoria go this far? Because she needs Elena dependent on her, James explained. Elena inherited a substantial trust fund when she married Marcus. Money that she's never really had to think about, because Marcus handles all their finances. Victoria has been working on Elena for months, convincing her that she needs to take control of her own money, her own life. The pieces began to fall into place for Marcus. Victoria's sudden interest in Elena's independence, her subtle criticisms of their marriage, her encouragement of Elena's doubts and frustrations. She had been playing a long game, positioning herself as Elena's savior and financial advisor. Where is Elena now? Marcus asked. Victoria's estate in the countryside, James replied. Elena thinks she's getting space to figure out what she wants, but Victoria is isolating her from everyone who might offer a different perspective. Marcus felt a surge of something between hope and rage. If Elena was being manipulated, if her decision wasn't entirely her own, then maybe there was still a chance to save their marriage. But the thought was immediately followed by doubt. Even if Victoria had influenced Elena, the core problems in their relationship were real. Elena's feelings of suffocation and loss of identity weren't Victoria's invention. What do you suggest I do? Marcus asked, looking between his brother and James. Don't try to contact Elena directly, James warned. Not yet. Victoria is expecting that, and she'll use any attempt at communication as proof that you're trying to control Elena even now. Then what? Thomas leaned forward. We expose Victoria's real motives. If Elena understands that she's being manipulated for financial gain, she might be willing to listen to reason. And if she still chooses to leave after that? Marcus asked quietly. The silence that followed was answer enough. If Elena chose to leave once she understood the full picture, then Marcus would have to accept that their marriage was truly over. But at least he would know that her decision was really hers. Over the next several hours, the three men developed a plan. James would use his investigative skills to dig deeper into Victoria's finances and her history of manipulating wealthy friends. Thomas would reach out to their mutual acquaintances to counter the narrative Victoria was spreading. Marcus would stay out of sight and try to get his own emotions under control. As evening approached, Marcus found himself alone in the library again, surrounded by the books that had witnessed his conversation with Elena the night before. He pulled out their wedding album, running his fingers over the photos of their happier days. In every image, Elena was radiant, But looking at them now, Marcus could see something he had missed before. Even in their early years together, there was sometimes a hint of uncertainty in Elena's eyes, a question of whether she was truly being herself or just playing the role of Marcus's wife. He thought about their courtship, how he had pursued her with single-minded determination, how he had swept her off her feet with grand gestures and expensive gifts. She had been young, barely 23 to his 30, and he had been so proud when she agreed to marry him. But had she ever really had a choice? He had been so confident, so sure of what was best for both of them, that he had never really asked her what she wanted. The realization that he might have been the architect of his own heartbreak was almost too much to bear. But as the night deepened and the manor grew quiet around him, Marcus began to understand that if he truly loved Elena, he would have to be willing to let her go. And if there was any chance of winning her back, it would have to be by becoming the man she needed him to be, not by proving he had been right all along. The thought terrified him, because it meant admitting that everything he thought he knew about love and marriage might be wrong. But as he sat alone in the library, where his world had ended just 24 hours earlier, Marcus realized that perhaps it was time to learn a new way of loving, even if it was too late to save the only love he had ever known. 3 weeks had passed since Elena left Ravencrest Manor, and the autumn air carried the scent of dying leaves and approaching winter. Marcus stood at the window of his study, watching the groundskeepers prepare the gardens for the cold months ahead. The irony wasn't lost on him. Everything around him was dying or going dormant, just like his marriage. James had been relentless in his investigation, uncovering a web of financial manipulation that went far beyond what any of them had imagined. Victoria Blackthorne hadn't just been in debt. She had been running elaborate schemes for years, befriending wealthy women and slowly gaining access to their finances. Elena was her latest target, but there had been others. The evidence was damning and detailed, but it had come at a cost Marcus hadn't anticipated. The revelations about Victoria's true nature had reached Elena through mutual friends, despite Victoria's attempts to isolate her. According to James, Elena had confronted Victoria 2 days ago, leading to a dramatic argument that ended with Elena leaving Victoria's estate. But instead of coming home to Marcus, Elena had disappeared entirely. No one knew where she was. Thomas found Marcus in the study that afternoon, carrying a manila envelope and wearing an expression that made Marcus's stomach tighten with dread. "She filed for divorce," Thomas said without preamble, setting the envelope on Marcus's desk. "Her lawyer delivered the papers this morning." Marcus stared at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. He had been expecting this, but the reality of it still felt like a physical blow. Did she say anything? "There's a letter, separate from the legal documents." With trembling hands, Marcus opened the envelope and found Elena's familiar handwriting on cream-colored stationery. Her words were careful and measured, but he could feel the pain behind every sentence. Marcus, I know you must hate me for how I've handled all of this. I know the public humiliation and the way I left were unforgivable, and I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I'm writing to try to explain, even though I'm not sure I understand it all myself. When I discovered Victoria's deception, my first instinct was to come home to you. But then I realized that running back to you would just be another way of avoiding the real problem. Victoria didn't create the issues in our marriage. She just showed me what I was too afraid to admit to myself. I loved you, Marcus. I still love you. But I lost myself somewhere in trying to be the wife I thought you needed. I became so focused on making you happy that I forgot who I was when I wasn't trying to please you. That's not your fault, but it's not entirely mine either. We both got caught up in playing roles instead of being real with each other. I need time to remember who Elena is when she's not defined by being your wife or anyone else's anything. I need to make mistakes and face consequences and build something that's entirely my own. I don't know how long that will take, or who I'll be when I'm done. I'm not asking you to wait for me. I'm not asking for anything except understanding. Maybe someday we can be friends again, when we're both whole people instead of two halves trying to make a complete marriage. Asterisk. Asterisk. The divorce papers are just a formality. We both know our marriage ended long before that night in the ballroom. I'm sorry it took me so long to be honest about it. Asterisk. Asterisk. With love and regret. Asterisk. Asterisk. Elena. Asterisk. Marcus read the letter 3 times, before setting it down with shaking hands. Thomas waited patiently, watching his brother's face cycle through emotions, like storm clouds across a dark sky. She's right, Marcus said finally, his voice barely audible. About all of it. That doesn't make it hurt less. No, it doesn't. Marcus looked up at his brother, tears threatening for the first time since the night Elena left. But it makes it clean, doesn't it? No villains, no victims, just 2 people who loved each other badly. Over the following days, Marcus threw himself into responding to Elena's divorce petition with a thoroughness that surprised everyone, including his lawyer. He didn't contest anything. He didn't demand explanations or meetings. He simply agreed to her terms and ensured that she would be financially secure for life, whether or not she ever spoke to him again. But more importantly, he began the painful process of examining their marriage and his own behavior with the kind of brutal honesty he had never allowed himself before. He hired a therapist, Dr. Sarah Chen, who specialized in helping people understand patterns of control and codependency in relationships. Elena was right to leave, Marcus told Dr. Chen during one particularly difficult session. I did try to control her, but I convinced myself it was protection. I made decisions for both of us because I thought I knew better, not because I wanted to hurt her. The road to hell, Dr. Chen replied gently, is paved with good intentions. The impact of your actions mattered more than your intent, didn't it? Marcus nodded, finally understanding something that had eluded him for months. Love without respect wasn't really love at all. It was possession dressed up in prettier clothes. Meanwhile, Victoria Blackthorne's world was crumbling as spectacularly as she had tried to destroy Marcus's. James's investigation had been thorough, and the authorities were now involved. She faced charges of financial fraud and elder abuse related to her manipulation of several wealthy women over the past decade. The society pages that had once celebrated her as a mysterious and elegant widow now painted her as a calculating predator. But Marcus found no satisfaction in Victoria's downfall. Her punishment wouldn't undo the damage to his marriage, and it wouldn't bring Elena back. If anything, it just made him sad for all the unnecessary pain that could have been avoided if he had been a better husband from the beginning. 2 months after Elena left, Marcus received an unexpected visitor. Helena Ashworth, Elena's aunt and the woman who had raised her after her parents died, stood on his doorstep with the no-nonsense expression he remembered from family gatherings. "You look terrible," she said, echoing Thomas's words from weeks earlier. "But better than I expected, considering." Helena had always intimidated Marcus slightly. She was a retired professor of literature who had never married, had traveled the world alone, and had raised Elena to be independent and strong-minded. Marcus had sometimes felt she disapproved of their marriage, though she had never said anything directly. "I've spoken with Elena," Helena said as they sat in the library. "She's staying with me for now, trying to figure out her next steps." "So?" Marcus's heart lurched. "How is she?" "Confused. Hurt. Angry at herself more than anyone else." Helena studied Marcus carefully. "She told me about Victoria's manipulation, but also about your conversation the night she left. She said you didn't fight her decision. What was the point? She was right about everything." "Was she?" Helena's eyebrows rose. "About everything?" Marcus frowned, unsure where this was leading. "What do you mean?" "Elena told me she felt like she lost herself in your marriage, but she also told me about the charity work you encouraged her to pursue, the writing workshops you paid for even though you didn't understand her interest, the way you supported her friendship with James even though you clearly didn't like him." Helena leaned forward. "Those don't sound like the actions of a man trying to control his wife. But I made decisions without consulting her." "Yes, you did. You also made sacrifices she never knew about to support her dreams. You protected her from financial worries so she could focus on her passions. You encouraged her independence even when it scared you." Helena's voice was firm but not unkind. You weren't a perfect husband, Marcus, but you weren't the monster Victoria painted either. Marcus felt a flutter of something that might have been hope, but he quickly suppressed it. It doesn't matter now. Elena needs to find herself, and she can't do that if she's worried about my feelings. No, she can't, Helena agreed. But she also can't do it if she's running from the truth about what your marriage really was. Victoria convinced Elena that she was a victim. But the Elena I raised was never anyone's victim. She was a partner who lost her way. Just like you did. They sat in silence for several minutes. Helena seemingly lost in thought, while Marcus struggled with emotions he couldn't name. Elena doesn't know I'm here, Helena said finally. And I'm not carrying messages between you. But I wanted you to know that she reads every article about Victoria's trial. Every piece of news about you. She's not as disconnected as she pretends to be. What are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just observing that two people who loved each other badly might, with enough growth and honesty, learn to love each other well. Helena stood to leave, or they might not. But they can't make that decision if they're both running from the truth. After Helena left, Marcus sat alone in the library as darkness fell around him. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to really hope. Not for Elena's return, but for the possibility that they might both become the people they were meant to be, whether together or apart. The next morning, Marcus sat down at his desk and began to write. Not a letter to Elena, but a letter to himself, cataloging every way he had failed as a husband, and every way he planned to do better. Whether she was there to see it or not, it was the beginning of becoming the man Elena had needed him to be all along. And perhaps, if he was very lucky and very patient, the man she might choose to love again someday. Outside his window, the first snow of winter began to fall, covering the dying garden in pristine white. Marcus watched it accumulate on the windowsill and thought about second chances, about how sometimes things had to die completely before they could be reborn into something better. He didn't know if he and Elena would have that opportunity, but for the first time since she left, he believed it was possible, and for now, possibility was enough.